Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
So I would love to teach you some things about how to be in a caloric deficit without having to count calories and macros and all of the things. It's not easy, which is why in the 6 Months of Food Freedom program, we're working very closely with our clients to help them to formulate the habits that will elicit weight loss, but not 100% focusing on weight loss. So we're almost putting them in a calorie deficit without their knowledge, but not in an extreme way. Because in order for you to lose weight or to lose body fat, you do need to be in a slight calorie deficit. The reason why I say slight calorie deficit is because when we jump to the extremes, that's when compliance becomes challenging. That's where your hormones kind of get screwed up, and that's where things get really complicated, and it's not so much calories in versus calories out, right? But it is, but it isn't. So I know it's really confusing, and this is not meant to confuse you, but more so to give you a little bit of clarity. So there are some basic things that I want you to focus on if you are trying to lose weight, but without being hyper fixated on the scale or numbers, because it really just screws you up. So first things first, we teach this with all of our clients all of the time. It is super basic, but for whatever reason, people really struggle with this. And so this is where, although idealistically you could argue, well, if I'm eating less calories than my body is burning, then I'm going to lose weight. So if I decided to have 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day in order for to make that happen, then it's going to be, I'm going to be successful in the long run. Well, what we continuously see from a scientific perspective and then also an application perspective is that those who consume 3 balanced meals a day are usually less likely to overeat or binge eat. They're usually able to regulate their blood sugars. They're also able to get in adequate nutrients. So not only are they, losing the weight, but they're doing it in a healthy way. So basic concept number 1, which might be challenging for you, is to eat 3 balanced meals a day. So what is a balanced meal? It includes a carbohydrate, a protein, a healthy fat, and then a fruit or a vegetable. Most often, I encourage you to choose a lean protein, so that way it doesn't have the added fat, which then has added calories. Choosing a high fiber or complex carbohydrate, so it's very filling, right? The fiber is very filling. So between the lean protein that's not high in calories because it's leaner, so it has less fat, protein helps with fullness. Your carbohydrate is a complex carbohydrate high in fiber that also helps with fullness, so you're less likely to overeat as a result. And it also slows down your emptying. So basically you get that bulk in your stomach, so it's hard to fit more, right? So that's why fiber is important. And then we do want some fat in there, but we want a healthy fat to support our heart health, but we use it sparingly, right? So a little bit of olive oil, avocado spread, a hummus, some nuts and seeds, right? So just a little sprinkle, or if you're not choosing a lean protein, sometimes your protein will have that, right? So a carbohydrate, a protein, a fat, and then a color, your fruit or your vegetables. So fruit and veggies are really nutrient dense and super low calorie. So another thing you probably have heard me talk about again and again and again is to use the plate method at least once a day. So the plate method is a really great way to get all of those components, but in a portioned way. If half of your plate is filled with vegetables, well, that's most of your plate, right? So therefore, that's going to be low calorie without you having to count it. So half of your plate being those non-starchy vegetables, right? The non-starchy vegetables are basically anything except for corn, peas, potatoes, and your winter squashes. Also things like lentils and beans, those would be considered your starches. So they're more your starchy vegetables. So non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, kale, green beans, peppers, onions, tomatoes, carrots, whatever colorful vegetable you can think of that's non-starchy, that would go to half of your plate. The other quarter of your plate is your protein, which is about the size of your palm, right? And the palm is using your hands is a great form of measurement because it's usually proportionate to your body. So once again, you don't have to get out the weighing, the scale. You don't have to get out your measuring cups or anything like that. But if you think about using your hand as a visual aid, it'll at least give you a little bit of guidance, right? So palm-sized piece of protein and about a fist size of your starch. So that could be in the form of a grain like quinoa, brown rice, even white rice occasionally, right? Just choosing the whole grains most often, or a starchy vegetable. So that could be a baked potato, a sweet potato, yuca, corn, peas, whatever it is. That could be your quarter, right? So half of the plate non-starchy veggies, a quarter plate starch, the other quarter of your plate your protein, all right? So then the other component is incorporating some sort of fun or flavor. So don't be afraid to, you probably hear in like the diet culture industry, to be afraid of like sauces and creams and dressings, right? But a little bit of a nice sauce or a little bit of a nice dressing might be the thing that really elevates the dish, that makes you satisfied. So then you're less likely to now crave and want the other things later. So you're not going to be binging on, the chips later, or you're not going to be having a gallon of ice cream later. But because you had all the components to your meals present, you're super satisfied and you're less likely to kind of overdo it. Now, the thing that I miss, which we all know, and this might seem super repetitive, is your mindset, right? Your mindset is everything. So if you don't have a right mindset, if you're not really looking at food as a way to fuel you, but also you can enjoy it, and it's no longer this thing on a pedestal that's quote unquote good or bad, well, that's going to be the first solid step, that first solid foundation, right? So your mindset is super important also too, to keep you in a calorie deficit without having to track, weigh, or measure, okay? So the first part is your mindset. The second part is 3 balanced meals a day. And then the third thing is really overlooked a lot, which is adequate sleep or rest. So making sure you're really well rested. Studies show time and time and again that those who do not get adequate sleep or well-rested sleep, or just don't take enough rest days, maybe they're really working out a lot, but they're not giving their body a break, they tend to have increased cravings, and they end up overeating as a result, right? So making sure you're getting anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. You need to know yourself best. For some of you, you might really do well at that 7-hour mark. For some of you, 8. For some of you, might really need that 9. Maybe there's times you need 10. That's okay, right? But if you get consistently on a sleep schedule and you're making sure that sleep is a priority, believe it or not, guys, of all the supplements out there in the industry, sleep is the number one, best one that is so overlooked, right? So make sure you're getting enough sleep, because that will naturally keep your hunger levels in check and your cravings in check, okay? And just so for an additional kind of just bonus or additive to that, as you guys know from a practical perspective, think about it. If we're looking for energy, right? Calories are a unit for energy. So if we're tired, we need energy. So we're going to look for calories, but we're not going to look for any sort of calories. Our bodies are smart. They're built for survival. So they're going to look for sugar, right? They're going to want more sugar. And so they're going to ask you, can I get sugar? Because that's a quick thing of energy, right? That's how it's going to give me that boost, right? But what happens after that boost? We get a crash, right? So sleep is super, super important, okay? So mindset, 3 balanced meals a day, adequate sleep. Now, the fourth one, I kind of mentioned it, but I think we're going to go into it. So we talked about 3 balanced meals a day and the different components of it. The fourth thing is really prioritizing protein, right? Because we really do want to make sure that we're losing body fat, not muscle mass. And so we want to preserve our muscle mass. And when we prioritize protein at all of our meals and also at least one of our snacks, then we're likely reaching our protein needs. So what that means is that if you can preserve that muscle mass as time goes on, your metabolism actually will continue to either stay the same or increase, which without any sort of intervention, you will lose bone mass and your metabolism will get slower as you age. But if you're taking those interventions, like prioritizing protein, like strength training, like getting adequate sleep, with consistency, without going on those crazy diets, then you can actually preserve your metabolism and keep it really rocking, all the way into until you're in your later stages in life, okay? Seriously, it doesn't, without dieting and with proper intervention, your metabolism actually doesn't change that drastically each year. So a lot of people will blame oh, now I'm 30, or now I'm 40, or now I'm 50. And yes, menopause for women is a real thing, and that definitely plays a factor in a role. But with these really strong, structured habits, it's actually not that drastic. It's actually not that much of a difference if you can really adopt this new mindset and this new lifestyle, okay? And then sustainable weight loss is actually a lot easier from that, right? So the fourth thing is prioritizing protein. So making sure you're getting at least 20 grams of protein at each meal. This obviously varies based off of your age, your gender, your activity level, and certain things, but at least 20 grams of protein. Closer to that 30 would be ideal. And then your snacks, at least one of them having like a good substantial amount of protein. So anything in the double digits, so about 10 grams or more, is going to be a substantial amount of protein. So if you can focus on those 3 balanced meals a day, and then if you are snacking in between, making sure at least one of them is protein rich, so 10 grams or more, okay? That will really help with your fullness so that you're no longer overeating or undereating, right? And kind of going in that yo-yo. So that's super, super important, okay? So number 4, so we talked about 3 balanced meals a day, mindset, sleep, prioritizing protein. We could throw in hydration in there, because if you're, hydrated properly, you might not overeat, because sometimes our body confuses hunger and thirst. But water doesn't really have any calories, so not sure I want to throw it in there, but we'll just put water, saying hydrated, as bonus, okay? The fifth thing is really, really important, and that is really learning to honor your hunger and fullness cues. Now, you might be confused by this, right? Because if you're eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full, you might think, oh, well, that'll bring me to maintenance calories. And it might, but it also now gives us some wiggle room. So what I mean by that is once we first establish being able to utilize your hunger as a guide, your body will regulate, and actually weight loss will become a lot easier, or if anything, you'll just be a lot happier in your current body and realize, you know what, my body naturally drops to this, but then it doesn't go past that when I adopt these healthy habits. So you know what, I actually feel really good here. But also too, if you're in this place where you feel really consistent at maintenance, then it becomes like the littlest tweaks ever. It might just be like you stop eating after a certain time at night, or you look at your snacks, or you look at your dinners, and now you stop at 80% full, or you just are just a little bit more mindful of maybe where those extra calories might be coming in from, like maybe consumption of alcohol or added sugars in your coffee or whatever it is. You can then start really looking at those things. But at first, if we have that solid base, it becomes a whole lot easier, because then we have stability, then we have consistency. As dietitians, our hardest job is being able to help people when they're all over the damn place. It's why we start with small changes over time. It's why in our 6-month to food freedom program, in the first week or so, we're really just focusing on the basics, like the really small things, like, all right, let's just get those 3 balanced meals, or maybe you're not eating breakfast. Let's start eating breakfast. Here are some breakfast ideas that we agree upon, right? It might be getting better sleep. It might be hydrating with water. It is usually those simple little things that really start to move the needle. And then when we have that solid foundation, we can really begin to focus on the manipulation and structure of the itty bitty details that actually might start to move the scale in the direction that someone is looking for. Okay? So going back to the last one, honoring your hunger and fullness. One thing I encourage, we encourage our clients to do, is to utilize the hunger scale. So the hunger scale ranges from 1 to 10. 1 to 3 is I'm so hungry, I'm gonna faint, oh my God, this is horrific. 8, 9, and 10 is I'm so full, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up. The goal is to eat around a 4 or 5. It's like that gnawing at the tummy. I can definitely eat something. I'm a little bit hungry, or my energy's dropping a bit. So we want to start to eat around a 4 or 5, and then we want to be mindful, eat slowly, and really stop around a 6 or a 7. So a 6 is I'm full and satisfied. A 7 is I'm full, I'm satisfied, but if I take one more bite, I'm gonna be too full, right? So if you notice, if you don't eat all day long, or you get to like that hangry, right, that 2 or 3, you're probably gonna end up eating to an 8, 9, and 10, right? So you're thinking in your head, oh, if I eat less and work out more, well, then I'm going to lose weight, right? And it will work. But if we take that to the extreme, it makes compliance difficult, right? What I said earlier. So it's really important that we're being mindful of our hunger and our fullness, and we're trying to honor it as much as possible. And then slowly being able to learn that, you know what, I used to think I needed this amount to feel full, but I'm actually satisfied at this amount. And it tends to be a lower amount. And your stomach will actually start to shrink in your favor towards that goal of yours without you really having to fixate on it, okay? And so the last component to helping you to be in a deficit without having to track, weigh, or measure is movement, right? So it's being really intentional about movement, and it doesn't mean you're going crazy and you're doing these high intensity workouts. Believe it or not, that doesn't play too much of a role when it comes to weight loss or fat loss. And if anything, if you're doing really high intensity interval training and like you're training like crazy, but you're not doing the proper recovery, well, then you're working smarter instead of harder. But one of the things that you can really do to move the needle is just walk more, right? Or just stand more and sit less, or clean more on a day you would normally just binge watch Netflix and Hulu. And I'm not saying you can't do that, because I totally believe there's a time and place for that. But really just be intentional about movement. And so, this is where we can teeter on, is it obsessive or is it helpful, right? Because if you're someone who like you can't get a day without getting your steps, and it's really like all you can think about and you're stressing yourself out, well, then that's counterproductive. But if you can be honest with yourself and look at your watch and just say, you know what, this is motivating to me, this is helpful to me, I'm gonna I was gonna sit down and just chill, but before I do that, I'm gonna go do a walk around the block. And if you're in New York like me, or on the East Coast like me, or most parts of the US, I would say we're entering into the summer months. Or springtime. We're in the springtime. We're soon to be summer. It's really nice out today. It's like 68 degrees. I cannot wait to get outside. So it is a lot easier to adhere to more movement, more intentional movement, and I would even say more gentle movement, because it doesn't have to be crazy and extreme, and that can really help move the needle. So those are your main things. So mindset, 3 balanced meals a day, sleep, prioritize protein, what else did we say? Movement, honor your hunger, and that bonus of hydrating with water. So when we really put all that into play, that is really going to move the needle. Yeah, things are really going to start to change. And if they don't, one thing I want you to be intentional about, also the things that we didn't add, is patience and consistency, right? Those are super important. But say after you do that for a month, maybe 2 months. Let's give it a month. You do that for a month and you don't see or feel any changes. I also want you to understand that that's very normal, because the real sustainable change actually doesn't happen until like 2 or 3 month mark. So when we work with clients in a 6 month period, we're not even really worried about the weight. We'll have them weigh in just so we have a form of measure, but it's really not the main focus. The main focus is let's establish the habits and let's work on consistency, and more so, let's work on maintenance, because how many of you have probably gone up and down and up and down and up and down, and it's insane already. Let's work on consistency. Let's work on maintenance. Let's work on balance. Let's work on developing the healthy habits that we can. And then from there, we can explore where are small ways in which we can manipulate, where are we starting to notice? Let's take a deeper look. Like, are you measuring? Maybe in this point, you don't need to measure per se, but maybe you start to use less cream in your coffee, because maybe, I know for me, sometimes I have a heavy hand, right? So I just start to kind of taper back a bit. Or maybe we start picking up these not so helpful habits where at the end of the night, we're having a glass of wine when we can swap it out for some tea or some kombucha, right? Or maybe on the weekends, we've been doing a lot of takeout, and then we started doing more takeout during the week. And so it's like, even though I'm still making mindful choices, I don't really know how much oil they're putting or butter they're cooking. So it doesn't mean I can't eat out, but let me cook from home a little bit more often, right? So maybe those are some ways you can be more in charge of your choices. So there's endless amount of ways and opportunities for you to be able to actually be in a calorie deficit without having to be in the extremes and without having to track or measure. However, it does require a patience, okay? It does require time, and it also requires you to let go of this giant emphasis on numbers and the scale. And it really requires you to really just trust the process and really just understand that there's no end point. You're never done with this, right? This is a true lifestyle change. And you will eventually get there. You just can't give up. So you can shift, right? Stay committed to the plan, be flexible in the approach, right? That's one of my favorite lessons. So, all right. Anyways, that is it from me today. I am most certainly going to be using this audio for a podcast because as I was recording, I'm like, wow, this is really great content. So you guys being in the Facebook community are super lucky because you get to hear it first. So you're welcome. And if anything that I said resonated with you and you're looking for extra help, support, and guidance to get into that calorie deficit, to lose the weight in a sustainable way, but without having to be super hyper focused on numbers, without having to track weight or measure in those very rigid amounts and in very rigid ways, then I strongly encourage you to go to tipswithtony.com/coaching to apply to the 6 months of Food Freedom program. So again, tipswithtony.com/coaching, apply to the 6 months of Food Freedom program. We just graduated 2 people and we have 2 other spots. So there's actually 4 spots available, which is super rare for this time in April. But I forgot that we had people who, started in November. So, right. So they're starting to get to that point. So don't wait, apply. The sooner you get started, the happier you'll be. And if you have any questions, you can email me tipswithtony@gmail.com or message me on any social media platform that you are connected with me. All right, guys, have a fabulous day and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Tip with Tony.